Bleach 1000 Year Blood War episode 44 titled The Perfect Crimson is finally here, and it's time to break down and analyze how this episode compares to the manga. The title of the episode is clearly a reference to Kinpachi's monstrous new bankai, which was finally adapted into the anime. We got to see this demonic form tear Gerard Valkyrie apart. Now, this week's episode is very faithful to the source material, primarily adapting content from chapters 668 to 676. So it's literally 6.5 to 7 chapters worth of manga content that's been adapted here, clearly the most that we've had so far in Core 4. There were fewer anime exclusive editions in this week's episode, but that doesn't mean we didn't get any interesting scenes, as the episode begins with an all-new anime original scene at the Shinigami Research and Development Institute, where we learn that Ukitake's weakening power with Mimihagi is beginning to force the boundary between the three realms to collapse. So this confirms that Ukitake still being around and releasing Mimihagi is what's preventing the three worlds from colliding. Now, from this point forward, the episode blitzes through an enormous amount of manga content as it delivers both the Kinpachi bankai reveal against Gerard Valkyrie as well as Hitsugaya's completed bankai form, before ending on Hitsugaya and Byakuya commenting on how Renji and Rukia need to go to Ichigo. And there's also a post-credit scene covering an entire chapter worth of content, which I'll talk about later in the video. Now, with this much manga material packed into a single episode, this week leans far more heavily on faithful manga adaptation than anime original scenes. Hopefully by the end of this video, you're going to know the pacing of Core 4 and just how much manga material is left to adapt for the final 6 episodes of the season. As always, I'm going to refrain from talking about scenes which are one-to-one adaptations from the manga, and I'll solely focus on what's being cut, changed, and added to the anime. So without further delay, here is my manga versus anime comparison for episode 44 of the 1000 Year Blood War arc anime. So the episode kicks off before the opening song with an anime exclusive scene from the Shinigami Research and Development Institute. It's just under a minute long, as we see all of the screens at the Research and Development Institute reading warning. We cut to Ukitake with Mimihagi pouring out of him still, as Akon states what's going on. One of his underlings explains that the boundary expansion is now plus 1.02. He wonders why the sudden change. As his subordinate says, "How should I know? It means something out there is forcing the boundary open." Ryunosuke says what's happening, with Akon saying the only thing I can think of is that Captain Ukitake's power is weakening. The subordinate then states Akon at this rate, with Akon saying, "I know, the three worlds will cease to exist." We see this really cool imagery of this bird here landing in this puddle, and within the bird's eye, we see the Serete reflected in the sky of Karakura Town. So after the opening, the episode begins by adapting content from chapter 668 as the entire chapter is adapted. There are a few omissions and changes here, like at the bottom of page 2 of chapter 668, there are 2 panels where Gerard explains how the miracle works which are not adapted. Gerard says in the manga, this body that cannot be destroyed is enlarged by the people's fears. Hoffnung is a sword of the people's hopes bundled together. When it breaks, there will be despair. As Kinpachi activates his bankai, we get some new dialogue from Ikkaku and Yumichika, as Ikkaku says this spiritual pressure, with Yumichika saying, "Don't tell me it's Captain Zaraki's." The material from chapter 669 is adapted, and page 6 there is a minor change. Now this is where Ikkaku and Yumichika got that new dialogue, but their dialogue from page 6 of the manga is given to Byakuya and Hitsugaya instead. So the lines that they say in the manga, what just happened, look, the captain's skin is red. Aside from that, there's nothing else changed in chapter 669, it's a one-to-one adaptation. Adapting all the way up until the end where Kinpachi cuts Gerard Valkyrie in half. We then cut to chapter 670, and after page 1 is adapted, we get a anime exclusive scene which runs for just over 30 seconds. Now this is Ikkaku and Yumichika reacting to Kinpachi having cut Gerard in half, as well as a scene between Momo and Shinji. So Ikkaku says, "No way, did he pull it off the captain?" as Yumichika says, "What a man." Momo also reacts by saying a miracle before she notices Captain Hirako, as she says, "I'll get you out now," with him resting against rubble. But Shinji says, "Never mind me, you need to handle these two," as he turns her attention over to Rukia and Renji, who are collapsed on the ground. So Momo's off to heal them, as Shinji says he is counting on her. Now we return to material from chapter 670 as it's adapted all the way up until Gerard Valkyrie fuses himself back together. And also we see the Quincy cross there in the center of Gerard, which merges him together. The episode does a fantastic job of focusing on this, highlighting the importance of this Quincy cross as it's a major weak point for Gerard Valkyrie. As Gerard fuses together, we get a few seconds of reaction from Momo and Ikkaku as Momo says no, it can't be, with Ikkaku saying what a monster. Then we return to chapter 670 as the rest of the chapter is adapted. When Gerard's attack clashes with Kenpachi, this is expanded within the anime with some new scenes showing the collateral damage on the battlefield. It's only a few seconds long, but we see a shot of Shunsui and Nanao as Momo rushes after Renji and Rukia, who have collapsed under the crumbling ground, with Momo yelling out to them to save them. So the midpoint of the episode is at the end of chapter 670 where Hitsugaya unleashes Daiguren Hyorinmaru's completed form. Now this is where we get the mid-card of the episode, which is focused on the completed Daiguren Hyorinmaru as it explains that the bankai of Hyorinmaru, the Zanpakuto of Hitsugaya, who's the captain of the 10th division, it's a power that lets him grow wings and a tail of ice on his back, and it's stated to be the mightiest of the ice and snow type Zanpakuto abilities, freezing the moisture in its surroundings at will. In battle, the flowers of ice at his back scatter as time passes, so once they scatter completely, it becomes his perfected bankai form. Now in this completed form, it exerts extraordinarily high power in both offense and defense, but simultaneously it inflicts a side effect on Hitsugaya himself as it takes a massive toll on his still adolescent body. So the second half of the episode adapts the entirety of chapter 671, from Hitsugaya revealing his adult form all the way up until the end of the chapter, where Byakuya unleashes Ika Senjinka against Gerard. Then pages 1 to 6 of chapter 672 are adapted. This takes us all the way through to the dialogue between Byakuya and Hitsugaya, where Byakuya comments on his completed bankai taking a heavy toll on his body, with Hitsugaya stating that he's almost at his limit, as Gerard appears to have recovered from Byakuya's Ika Senjinka attack. Now only these 6 pages of chapter 672 were adapted because this is material left over from earlier episodes because there's been so much chopping and changing and rearranging of manga content. So the rest of 672 was adapted earlier in Core 4. Then the first 3 pages of chapter 673 are adapted, and this focuses on Rukia and Renji, so it seems like they've been healed by Momo and they are back on the battlefield. So it's literally the point up until where they arrive and they see Gerard healed as Hitsugaya tells them that this is what became of the enemy that these guys were fighting earlier. Again, these first 3 pages of chapter 673 were leftover material that wasn't adapted into earlier episodes, again because of the rearranging of the manga content. Then pages 7 to 13 of chapter 674 are adapted, as this takes us up to the credit song. So this is all of the gag material where Rukia and Renji think that Hitsugaya's older brother has appeared onto the battlefield. So the episode reaches the credits at page 13 of 674, where Hitsugaya and Byakuya are speaking to each other about how Ichigo is a friend to Rukia and Renji, so it's important for them to be by his side. Okay, then for the post-credit scene we get over a minute and a half worth of anime original content, as we cut back to the Shinigami Research and Development Institute. It seems like with the disturbances between the realms, Hollows have now started to overrun Karakura Town. One of the Squad 12 Shinigami says the soul circulation's growing unstable at this rate, as another subordinate says the Hollows are about to flood in. Akon says we've got our hands full with these monsters as it is. He says the ones who can get to the living world right now, as he's cut off by Ryunosuke, who says I'll go. We were the ones assigned to Karakura Town to begin with. Protecting the people there is our job. As he then gets nervous and states, I don't know how much we can actually do, but we'll do everything that we can. Ryunosuke is then hit by Shino, who says, don't smack me like that, Shino-san, as Shino says, get it together. If you said you'd do it, then hold your head high to the end, Ryunosuke. As Shino explains to him, you're not alone. Even if your nerve gives out 100 times, I'll smack you on the back 101. As Shino jokes and says, that's one too many smacks. Then several Shinigami, led by the 3rd seat of the 1st Division, Lieutenant Okikiba, arrive as they back up Shino and Ryunosuke, who are all heading to Karakura Town to fend off off all of the hollows. As Shino says, we'll protect them, all of us, as Ryunosuke agrees. Now this is an amazing piece of anime original content that's been squeezed into the end of the episode, truly fleshing out what's going on in the other areas of the battlefield. Now, just when you thought they had adapted enough manga material for this episode, the final minute or so of the episode chooses to adapt the entirety of chapter 676. So this is cutting back to Ichigo's confrontation with Yhwach immediately after he activates the half-hollow Horn of Salvation form. Now, there is a new piece of dialogue that's given to Yhwach here as he reacts to the transformation, as he states, "I see, so that was your aim." Now, for some strange reason, there are two panels that are cut from pages 5 to 6. Now, these are important panels in my opinion, as they help to explain how Ichigo tipped the equilibrium of his power in order to activate this Horn of Salvation form. So in the manga, Ichigo explains the Quincy power I got from my mother manifested by the Old Man Zangetsu, and the hollow inside me mixed with the Shinigami power I got from my dad. While they maintained equilibrium by opposing each other, they were forged together as Zangetsu into these two swords. If that equilibrium made him behave himself, then tipping the balance should bring him out. And in the past, when I was struck by huge amounts of Shinigami or hollow powers, the inner hollow took over. Now, for some reason, this was omitted from the episode. I mean, this could just be rearranged and they might adapt it later into episode 45, but that's yet to be revealed, as episode 44's post-credit scene ends right at the final page of chapter 676, where Ichigo launches his Gran Rei Sero Getsuga Tensho against Yhwach. The episode then immediately cuts to the poem for the episode, which is read by both Ichigo and Orihime. So Ichigo's voice actor reads the dialogue, "There is nothing I can do, I only want power," as Orihime says, "the power to protect, that and nothing more." As we then cut to the title card of episode 45, which will be titled Defend You. Now, this week's episode of Bleach was a strange one for me because while I enjoyed it, I couldn't shake a real concern about the pacing. This single episode blitzed through nearly 6 to 7 chapters worth of manga content, delivering both Kenpachi's bankai and Hitsugaya's completed bankai in a single episode. I'd fully expected Kenpachi's bankai to headline this entire episode, with Hitsugaya's completed bankai form anchoring episode 45. So now, to see them crammed into this episode along with the Gran Rei Sero Getsuga Tensho really caught me off guard. Don't get me wrong, all of these reveals looked incredible and they were adapted really well, but I can't help to feel that the rushed pacing of the manga is now moving its way over into the anime. And what makes things worse is that Core 4 has now been confirmed to end at episode 50. We began Core 4 with 25.5 chapters of manga content to adapt, so after this 4th episode, there is only around 10 to 11 chapters worth of material to adapt into the final 6 episodes of Core 4. So this works out to be fewer than 2 chapters per episode. In other words, the back half of this core has plenty of runtime to spare, which makes cramming 2 reveals of this scale into a single dense episode like this feel like a genuinely strange call. I mean, the anime is racing through the content right now in order to bank as much runtime as possible for the anime original expansion for the final battle against Yhwach, I believe. Next week's episode is titled Defend You, and this is the one ending on Ichigo pressuring Yhwach with his new form, with Rukia and Renji also rushing to Ichigo's location. So those scenes of them two fighting alongside Ichigo and Orihime in the opening, they may be adapted into episode 45, and if you'll note, we didn't see any of Uryu vs Hashward in episode 44, so I'm guessing we'll see them again in episode 45. But we have now reached the point of the video where I want to hand over the discussion to all of you. What were your thoughts on this week's episode? Did you enjoy finally seeing Kenpachi's bankai and Hitsugaya's completed bankai adapted into the anime? How do you feel about the pacing and the decision to adapt all of these huge moments into a single episode? Were you surprised by the anime original post-credits scene, which sets up a battle against hollows within Karakura Town? I do look forward to reading all of your comments on this latest episode of Bleach, and if you've been enjoying these breakdowns and want to keep up with everything that this final core has to offer, then subscribe to the channel for regular Bleach content. And lastly, thanks for making it to the end of this one, and I look forward to seeing you for my breakdown and analysis of episode 45 of the all-new Bleach 1000 Year Blood War arc anime next week.
A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access, and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.